What I want to go on to now is the animal mutilation business, which a lot of you are aware of. We all know the animal mutilation syndrome is taking place, but I wonder whether we all are aware just to what degree this thing is taking place. And trying to make progress with this animal mutilation, because trying to find out what's happening is like banging your head against a wall, believe me. It's a type of thing where people are not supposed to ask questions. These mutilations, they're not. We were initially under the impression that these mutilations were only taking place at night. But that is not the case. They're taking place in broad daylight, yet even though they're in daylight, nobody ever sees them. Who's done it? Now, I'll just go through one or two slides on the mutilations, which some might find unpleasant, but it's the only way you can describe something, by showing people visuals. These mutilations, like that lamb, happened on the east coast of England, and where they've had a real blatting with animal mutilations over the last couple of years. And once again, one farmer had 40 sheep in a field killed in one night this way. They actually, people have heard me talk about this, but where they actually got a vigilante group of farmers together and they sat in the fields with their guns because of this particular field being subject to this blatting. And they sat there all night in this field one night, never saw a thing. Following morning there was a mutilated sheep in the same field as where they'd been sitting guard. Now, I've only just recently found out a very interesting thing about this, because one of the people who was in that field, and I've only found this out in the last few days, he'd been having a lot of problems, head pains and blacking out. And he was once involved in a road accident where he had quite severe head injuries, and he went to, obviously, the hospital because of this business, and they said that they scanned him and said they thought he had a very slight blood clot on his brain. But interestingly, while he's going through all this, it turned out that two of the other people who were in that field the same night as him have also developed the same symptoms and have also ended up at hospital with the same blacking out situation and loss of memory and all sorts of things. And they reckon both of them have probably possibly got a very small blood clot on their brains as well. Maybe a pure coincidence, but it is a big coincidence if it is the case. So there was 40 odd in one field. It went on for weeks and weeks, did this over at the east coast of England, up near Scarborough, Fylingdales, Whitby, all that area. They were getting a real blatting. And it continued for an awful long time. Animals were being killed and they were being quickly removed by the Ministry of Agriculture, who moved in, who refused to talk about, deny all knowledge. And now that one is from Northern Ireland, as our friends from Northern Ireland in the audience will know. It's just a typical cattle mutilation where there's not a sign of blood around, of course. With any of these mutilations, you never find any blood. There's hideous wounds, there's organs removed, but never a sign of blood. Now that one, that cow there has got half of its jaw's gone. It's just the skeleton of its jaw. Various organs have been taken from it, including its udder. That is for Northern Ireland. I'm just pointing out this goes on all over the place. It's not going on just in the States or Canada or Puerto Rico. It's going on here. It's going on in Scandinavia. And one has to wonder at times whether this does affect human beings, whether they ever do find human beings in the same situation. And we do know about the one that was found in Brazil, which I haven't brought the slides today because I'm sure it could distress people to see it. But it is going on. Now, I was talking to my good friend from Puerto Rico, George Martin, before I came on, and of course George is going to, he'll thrill you with what he's got to tell you about what's going on there, so I don't intend to get involved in it. But one thing we were saying is that what is happening here with our animal mutilations is identical to what they're getting in Puerto Rico and Brazil, but he will go into that. Foxes, all forms of wildlife. One time we thought it was only domestic animals it was happening to. That is not the case. It is happening to all forms of wildlife. And it doesn't matter how big or how small the animals are. And as I go on with this, you'll see by the time I come to the end of this slide exactly what I'm talking about. Hole in the head, brain has disappeared, rectum cord out, no blood anywhere in the body. There was one incident out on the east coast where, and once again some people may have heard this before, where a chap was driving along the road in broad daylight. As he was driving along, he said he suddenly seemed to be sort of a mist in front of him in the distance. And as he was driving along, suddenly a badger fell out of the air and landed in the road in front of his car. Of course, he jumped on his brakes violently. He said he did catch the badger with the car, but he didn't hit it hard because it dropped a few feet in front of him and he jumped on his brakes. When he got out, the badger was still kicking, but it had a hole in its head, just the same as this fox had. And unfortunately, the badger died very, very shortly afterwards. But this thing fell out of the air. Now these I'm just one or two newspaper cuttings. People have asked me when I've spoken before, well, can you show us some of these cuttings that appear in the papers? That was about mutilations which were coming down in North Wales. They were getting sheep mutilated down in North Wales, and that was just an article that appeared in one of the local newspapers relating to these sheep. Well, this was the area where a lot of mutilations, ranging from cattle right the way through the animal system, from deer to badgers to foxes, all the way down, were all being found because there's some vast forests around that area. But it's interesting that it's in close proximity to a Ministry of Defence establishment. And whether there's any significance of that by that, I really don't know. Now, that is one of the deer that was found up in Finders. Can you see the hole in the centre of the head, which is perfectly round? There's no way it's a gunshot wound, by the way, that, ladies and gentlemen. It's far, far too big for any gunshot wound. There's not the slightest sign of blood. The brain's gone. And my understanding, that's a fox that was found. That was down the south of England. Now, I don't know. It was one that was sent to me where they said this fox had been found in this lady's garden. They considered it was possibly an animal mutilation by the sort of pattern that we talk about. I'm not so sure. It's certainly got organs removed. There's certainly no sign of blood there, which of course are indicative of this type of thing. But maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Now, this is one from America, where they were getting all the deer deaths, the same type of thing. I'm just trying to draw the patterns between what's happening in other countries and happening here. And they were getting the same type of things, where those puncture wounds made in the animals, wild deer, etc., in fairly large numbers. That's a hole in the head of a sheep, and its brain's gone. Once again, no blood. This one was, it's just a drawing. It was a drawing and a statement somebody sent to me, and it was down in Wiltshire, near the White Horse monument on the hillside. They actually found a mutilated white horse at the foot of that hill, and they said it had been mutilated in the standard pattern of animal mutilation. But apparently the authorities quickly moved in and removed the carcass of the horse, and then nobody could find anything more about it. And so that was going on at the time when they had the Operation Blackbird, monitoring the corn formations when they were appearing. You might be, just to throw another one in here, once again some of you probably know that there's just been what would appear to be a relatively big breakthrough in this corn formation business. There is a formation appeared in I think it's within the last week or 10 days, and they're calling it the snowflake formation, and it is a perfect snowflake pattern, the pattern you get of snowflakes. Now, interestingly, there was a student apparently down there with his girlfriend, and they were camping out near Alton Barns, and in the middle of the night they suddenly spotted these balls of light flying around over this particular field, and he had his camcorder with him, and he recorded 2 balls of light coming in over this particular field and then starting to, if you like, dance with each other and moving in a spiral effect over the top of the field. Then at some stage they were joined by 2 more balls of light, which he has also got on camera, and all 4 balls of light start to do these aerobatics over this particular field, and then eventually they shoot away. All this was caught on camcorder. Anyway, the following morning, this exact field where these things have been flying over, they found this snowflake effect pictogram. And I understand that Colin Andrews has got this video in his possession. I don't know what his intention is to do, but he has got this. The people who took the video want nothing to do with it. They're shy of publicity. They don't want the names revealing or anything. So if it is what they say it is, it's a very, very interesting breakthrough. But they're certainly going to, apparently they're having the film analysed at this moment in time. That was just digressing slightly. Yep. People who've heard me talk before will have heard me talk of all the seals which were being found minus their heads up in the Orkney Islands and those areas where these bodies of seals were being washed up onto the beaches, and they all had their heads, well, we say they were being washed up, they were being found dead on the beaches in quite large numbers. And they were all minus their heads, and this was happening over a period of days. I spoke to the vets involved because they actually did some autopsy on one of these bodies, and they said that these heads had been removed in a very, very surgical, very precise type of way, and that every head had been cut off at exactly the same point, and the cut had gone straight through the same part of the spine, the two bones of the spine in every case, and not once had the cutting instrument touched the spine. So it was really extraordinary. And they were finding these things, as I say, these poor devils in numbers. They said, we spoke to the Seal Protection League, etc., and they said there is no way this is the work of normal predators like killer whales and things like this, of course, who usually prey on seals. They said there was no way that this was the case. The big argument was at the time, it was going on by the police and the Seal Protection Society, was, were the animals being killed on the beach, or were they being killed at the sea and they were being washed in? The police attitude was that they must be getting killed at sea purely and simply because there's no sign of blood on the beach at all. But the Seal Protection League were under the opposite opinion. They reckoned the things could have been killed on the beaches where they were found. This is an interesting one. There may be some people in the audience who know about this one, but it was one that was passed to me from down south where some people had their pot-bellied pig killed. It was night. It was put in a barn at night, apparently, this pot-bellied pig, where they had their other animals. And the barn door was closed at night, and it was just a latch. There was no bolt or anything like that, just latched. Anyway, when they got up the following morning, they found that the barn door had been torn off its hinges, and the pot-bellied pig was missing. And it was found about half a mile away, minus its head and one of its legs. Once again, there was no blood anywhere around to be found. But the interesting thing about it is the fact that whatever had got this pig out of that barn doesn't seem to have had the intelligence to realise all he had to do was lift a latch to open the door. It had physically got this barn door and ripped it off the hinges. And the people who own this barn said this would have taken something of extreme strength to have been able to have done this. So that's another strange one. This is just another picture of a couple of deer that have got the same type of holes in their head, and they, believe me, they have lost a large number of these deers. The game wardens up in these areas, this forested area up on the east coast of England, have been finding these in fairly large numbers. And I was lucky to be able to get some of them to do some photographing before these things got whipped away, before anybody could find them. Even a hedgehog. This is one or two. I threw one or two slides in of the American side of it just to sort of give you comparisons again of what they do. How they actually excise the flesh away from the lips of the animal, the tongues disappeared, the eyes or ears disappear, yet, once again, never any blood. That's one with a cow which has had its udder removed, no blood. These are the ones which have just been recently shown in our magazine. They're from Sweden. They are getting animal mutilations out in Sweden the same as we are. And this is a moose which has been killed and mutilated, and it's got injuries to all four of its legs, which were broken, and the joints were crushed. Now this is interesting. This crushing business. I've had this come to me before, where animals which have been killed have found that it's been found that the bones, some of their bones, have been pulverized inside them by what must be a very, very powerful force, because when you start talking about bulls that weigh 1,000 pounds and they're found dead and their bones crushed, it makes you wonder what it is capable of doing this. And that brings me back to the case of the Captain Mantell case, where the pilot went up with an aircraft to intercept a UFO and was lost. They eventually found the aircraft crashed about 100 miles away, and the aircraft had come down to ground. The way it had come down on the ground was totally contrary to the way it should have come down. It didn't come down nose first. It was a nose-heavy aircraft. Didn't come down nose-heavy. It came down flat, like as if it just flopped down into the ground. But the reason I mention this is because when they got the pilot from the plane, it turned out that every bone in his body had been crushed. And they just couldn't understand why, because these injuries were not consistent with an aircraft crash. That's just a chief inspector of the Swedish police with a Geiger counter testing for radiation. That's just a close-up of the one of the animals. That is to show the way the rectum is cored out, absolutely cleanly cored out by some method that we don't even have the ability to do at this moment in time. Now, we're coming to the last ones of these now, but I want to focus on this because these are mice. These are obviously mice. It's a bad picture because they're slightly out of focus. These were found on a farm down in the south of England where they've been having an awful lot of UFO problem, activity, whatever you want to call it. Now, we first had a case of this about, maybe 18 months ago in Barnoldswick in Lancashire, where a family were being subject to all sorts of UFO alien activity at their home. I went to interview them at their home. They'd had all sorts of strange things happening, UFOs appearing outside their house at night, strange visitations when they were in bed at night, all sorts of electronic interference at their home. And right in the middle of all this activity, the housewife went out into the garden one morning and found all these dead mice lined up on the lawn. And they'd all got this little hole in their head, the same way as the larger animals had, with the rectums cored out. We're talking about mice. Now, this particular case is another one where the same thing, identical thing has happened, where they found all these mice lined up, holes in their heads, rectal areas cored out. And this particular case is related to those who have read the story I wrote about the Jason Williams case, the young boy who was being abducted, and I'll go into that because I'm going to come on to abductions next. But it's happened on the property which is owned by Jason Williams' parents. So it just goes to show we're going right across the spectrum of animals here, from the largest right the way down to the smallest. Now, what in God's name is it that can do something like this to mice? And what are they trying to prove? I mean, when mice are lined up like this, as they were in the previous case, there's something obviously lining these mice up to do this like that. I mean, that's not sort of a haphazard way of if the bodies were thrown out. They're being actually laid out by that, like that, and left like that. So what is the logic behind something which is doing something like this? Is it being done to scare people? Or is it being done to tell them something else? It's very, very difficult to really come to terms with exactly what is going on with this mutilation business because, well, I don't know. There is something doing it, and as I say, my friend who will be following me speaking will put you in the picture a great deal more with what they have come up with, and they've come up with some very substantial information. I honestly believe that this is being done by some ET. Everything points at it being done by ET. UFOs are being seen flying over the fields where this type of activity is taking place. Regular way, people are reporting UFOs over the fields. Then they find animals mutilated in the fields where these UFOs have been overflying. I have written to more professors of veterinary sciences, agricultural sciences, you name the sciences, and I have a book with everyone listed at all the universities and everything else. I've written letters by the dozen about this to them, explaining, sometimes putting photographs in envelopes from city. Not once in all the letters I have written have I ever had an answer. Never once. That has got to say something in itself. Now, the autopsy which was carried out on a sheep 2 or 3 years ago from a Filingdales incident, which I told our investigators who attend these conferences, it was done by a professor down at Bristol University. He came up with a 40-page document at the end of it, but which basically told, it was being read out to me, the results of this autopsy on the telephone, because the person who had this autopsy done had just received the report. And he was reading it. He says, you aren't going to believe what this report is saying. And he was reading it out over the telephone to me, and I've actually got this recorded. I haven't got it here with me. I've got it at home on an audio recording, because I tend to tape some conversations. And The first thing he said on it was that this animal was radioactive. And the second thing of any significance that came out over the telephone to me was that there's something had happened to this animal which had totally altered its genetic structure. The cells in its body had been altered. They were not the same. Some sort of reversing polarity, if you like. It was at that time when he was reading these things out to me over the telephone that he had a visit at his front door, and some authorities arrived at his front door with a warrant to search his premises and confiscated everything he got, including that report he was reading out to me. They took the lot. And they said it was under the national security heading. That is why it was not in our interest to know this kind of information. So we went back, or he did, went back to this professor who'd done the original report and says, look, can we have a duplicate of this report? And by this time, this professor had been got at. He said, look, there is no way I am going to give you another report. He said, if anybody asks me, he said, I will deny that I ever gave you the first one. And he said, I wish I'd never got mixed up in this business. He said, I value my family and my job too much to get any more involvement. He says, so I don't want anything else to do with you. These are what the things that are going on. That's just another one of the mice. That is a bad photograph. They took a photograph, they were on the phone to me and said, look, with these mice, we've got these mice with all this happening. I said, look, for God's sake, get me some photographs so we can show the detail of what exactly is happening. Unfortunately, that one, they put it on a table to get a close-up of it, and it's out of focus. But what it is basically, I don't know whether you can see it from here, but it has actually, that particular photograph, had it been in focus, will show you that the rectum has been cored out on the mouse. But of course, it is a bad one, unfortunately. Okay.